You're listening to What It's Like with Luce, a podcast highlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host Lucy Norris, and on today's episode, I'm chatting with founder and CEO of Grypmat, the multi-purpose, non-slip, flexible tool tray. Coming from a small conservative farming town in Ohio, this week's guest didn't come from an area that encouraged becoming hugely successful. Struggling with imposter syndrome, he began his working life in the Airforce National Guard so he could go to college and study mechanical engineering. From his early days playing with Lego, he'd always had a knack for innovation, so it was no surprise that on identifying a big pain point in his job as a jet mechanic, he set about creating a solution. Tired of his tools slipping off the curved surface of the aircraft, he took inspiration from the non-slip phone mat in his mom's car, and Grypmat was born. Bringing the product to life is only the beginning of his incredible story, as he quickly sold to the likes of NASA, the FBI, Disney, and secured fans in the Shark Tank judges, where he appeared to successfully pitch his idea. Named one of 2018's best innovators by Time magazine, here's what it's like to be Tom Burden. Welcome, Tom. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. I really appreciate you giving up your time. I think a really nice starting point to kick off the whole conversation would be to share a little bit about your experience growing up.
So yeah, growing up in Ohio is like a pretty small farming town. But yeah, it was very interesting, especially with what we're seeing now with very huge events happening in our country, in our world right now with COVID-19, with, BLM, where in my hometown, it's very, I want to say like secluded, but very, it's pretty far out in the boonies. So the concept of like diversity is like very low, as well as like the concept of having to like wear a mask is like almost unheard of. So I feel like my hometown is like, not the most progressive on adjusting to new topics like that. So it has been interesting, like seeing, talking to people back in my hometown of like how things are going. Like my dad was really upset about having to wear a mask when he goes into Menards, and this was like at the peak of everyone wearing masks. And here, like in Hawaii, like everyone wears masks anywhere you go. So it's like not even a question, like do I have to wear a mask? It's like you leave, you have a mask on. If you want to go into a restaurant or any like residence or any like store or anything, you have to have a mask on. So I even got turned away from like going up to a food truck. So it's just funny because there's like some places you have to wear a mask and then you don't really have to, or they might have a sign up for a mask and then they don't really follow the rules. But yeah, it's been pretty interesting. When you're raised in like a small town, you think like that's the world, and then you start to get out and you're like, oh wow, the world's like much different. So
obviously, you've created a product. So do you think that maybe need or interest in innovation was always there from a young age, or is it something that came later on in life?
Yeah, so I always had an interest in making new things. That was really came from playing with Legos as a kid. I guess like, becoming an entrepreneur was kind of taboo. I feel like my parents really like put a small seed into the beginning, but then like I dealt with a hardcore imposter syndrome, which in my being from like a small farm town, there's like a deep sense of mediocrity and like the desire to be mediocre and like stay in the middle of the road and don't stick out too high or too low. You don't want to be like make too much money, but you also don't want to make too little money. Or same with success. Like you don't want to be like too successful and like cause a ruckus. You also like don't want to be someone who's like dragging behind. So, it was pretty hard for me to like break through that small town mindset where, like the core of it was a lot of comparison. Like the core of it was looking at other people, seeing what they have, and like, all right, I'm going to see what everyone else has. I'm going to get like 10% better. I'll be like a little bit better, but like where in reality, I'm not. Like what I encourage is like just being the best person that you can be, which requires only comparison to yourself. So yeah, breaking through that was quite the journey.
Do you think that you managed to break through that through finding your interest that you then went on to, I guess, study more of in mechanical engineering? Do you think that was your way of maybe carving more of that path to creating things?
Mechanical engineering did help to a point. Uh, Mechanical engineering is like, it's very interesting because so when I was like 6, my mom took me somewhere to get pictures, and she was like, you know, what do you want to get pictures? What do you want to get a picture with? And I was like, I want to get pictures with Legos. And the photographer said to me, she was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, an inventor. And she goes, oh, so you'll go to college for engineering. So I was like, yep, that's what I want. I want to be, go to college for engineering. So then I went to college for engineering. And I remember the last class that you have is called senior capstone, where you make something new. So you're supposed to use like all your skills that you have, and you're about to make, you got to come up with something new that's going to solve a problem. And at that point, I realized that engineers are not inventors. I realized engineers are people who are given problems and they do what they can to solve the problem. They're actually given problems and they're told how to solve the problem, and that's how they solve problems. Where inventors identify problems themselves and find simple solutions to solve those problems. So I remember when I walked into Capstone, I actually like missed the first day because I was doing something with Grypmat, and I had this new idea for like for people on the battlefield in the military, because I was in the Air Force at the time. And I remember walking to the class, and someone I went to high school with came up to me and he goes, hey man, you got a group yet? And I was like, no, I missed the first day, don't have a group. He goes, well, if you want, man, you can join my group. I go, okay, what are you making? And he goes, oh, we're making a tennis ball launcher. And I was like, so is this like Capstone would make something new, right? Yeah, totally make something new. I was like, so is there anything like out there that's similar to this? He's like, yeah, I mean, there might be. I mean, there's like the tennis ball like thing with a wheel, like the tennis ball shooter, but like this is a launcher. I'm like, okay, like, so how's this different? He's like, well, we're going to make it like less complex, and we're going to make it like cheaper. And I was like, all right, I think I'm just going to start my own group. Like, thanks, bro. I'm kind of out on that. So that's when I started seeing more ideas like that. And I was like, really? Like no one, I was like, I've been waiting for this class to make something new. Like thinking about it, this should have been class 1, of like, all right, we're gonna make something new. Cause I didn't realize how much training people needed in like identifying a problem and like creating a solution. Cause I can like, as an inventor, I'm always identifying problems and like creating simple solutions. What I needed help with at the time was like connecting those dots of like, okay, here's my simple solution. How do I just make that? Here's the Grypmat. It's a rubber tray. How do I just like make the rubber tray? I don't know how to prototype it at the time. So yeah, it was pretty interesting of like the concept of innovation within engineers. So.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting. And one thing you said there, which, I think ties into the whole thing, well, as part of your founding story too, you were in the Air Force, which I find so interesting as coming from a country where I don't know if we have an Air Force, actually. I know we have an army, but we're not really a very strong military base over here in Ireland. So I don't really know too much about that and what that experience would have been like. So can you share a little bit about why you went into it and what those years were like for you?
Yeah, so here in the United States, the military they have a lot of benefits for people who join the military. So the core reason, I mean, growing up, I always like wanted, I felt like called to be a part of the military. The brand of the military is very strong here in the United States. And, they always have like recruiters at schools, and like what they'll do is a lot of times if you end up joining, like they'll give you some time. So after you do all your training, you'll get like leave, which is like a vacation. Like you'll have time off, and they'll basically like you'll go home, and typically you go home, and then what you can do is work with a recruiter for like a week or two, and go to your school and like talk to people that you went to high school with, and like encourage them to do the same. Now, the thing is, when you're doing that, it's kind of like extending your vacation, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah, you're like at the school, but you're kind of like hanging out with, you're hanging out in your hometown, you're hanging out with people that you know and friends and family. So, yeah, would see a lot of those people in high school. And then the core of it was free college. Was they'd pay 100% tuition. So being in the National Guard, which means so the National Guard is a branch like under the Air Force. So the Air Force has like active duty, which they work full time, and then National Guard and reserves are like part time. So they'll go to the base like 1 week in a month. So sign up for part time, you get like 100% tuition paid. You get $20,000 sign-on bonus, and then they also pay you for your training and pay you every time you go to the base. So being 18, that was like a really good deal.
Yeah,
And
not bad.
yeah, I did not want to get into any college debt, so I was like, all right, let's do it. So yeah, it was quite the experience. I would say like the being in the National Guard was like a pretty big like culture shock, and like got me out of the like there's definitely like more diversity. Yeah, the military here is like very popular, very big. United States puts a lot of funding towards the military. But yeah, I mean, I used it to use the benefits to like really impact the rest of my life.
And so your product or your brand is Grypmat. So I guess how did that come about? What's the story behind the idea? And because I think that you founded it in 2013. I don't know if I'm wrong about that.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of I was struggling. So my job. To kind of like clarify like perception of military a little bit is my job was to be an F-16 mechanic. So a lot of people think, oh, you're in the military, you're like, you got a gun and you're like in the desert and you're like, where I would work on the jets. So we would be like, if I were to get deployed anywhere, I'd be at the base, like staying at the base, making sure the jets were always fixed. So I would work on like the machine gun on the jet. And yeah, I was tired of my tools sliding off the aircraft. And it's a really big pain point because like the jet is pretty high up. It's on a curved surface. Specifically where I was working was like one of the most curved spots. And you cannot lose any tools. You cannot lose any, like it's the smallest nut or bolt, like can't lose anything. And there's not too many places to set your tools. And I'm like, I was like, I really want to solve this problem. And I was coming up with all these different ideas on how to solve the problem where like, as an inventor, like I didn't realize what I was doing before, but as an inventor, what I'll do is I'll like record my voice talking about like a new idea. Sometimes I can't identify the new idea. I'm just identifying the problem. So at this point, I'm just like, I want to solve this problem that's on the jet. And then later I'll like think about how can I like solve this problem? And later in my mom's car, there was a non-slip mat on her dashboard that would like hold her cell phone in place when driving. So like it would like grip so it wouldn't slide when she's driving. And I was like, well, it'd be nice if we had that on, the jet so we could like set tools on it. Yeah, that's really how it started. What I didn't realize was that, this tool organization So what I didn't realize is the specific problem that I was identifying was keeping your tools accountable during maintenance. So there's a lot of like ways to keep tools accountable, like pre and post maintenance. But as a mechanic, you know, if you're working on jets, if you're working on boats or cars or anything, you know, in a single shift, you could work on 1 to a dozen different aircraft or cars or whatever. So the thing is, you know, when you're done and you bring your tools back and you're checking to make sure you have all your tools in there, you know, sometimes or oftentimes something's missing and you're like, I have no idea where that is. I've been working for, you know, 8 to 12 hours. So that's like the core of the Grypmat, where I initially I was like really focused on keeping it, you know, initially I was focused on like Air Force fighter jet maintenance, which is like crazy tiny. And then I started going to like, okay, how about we get into like aviation, or then it was just like military aviation. Then it was like general aviation. Then it was like, oh, like aviation automotive. And now it's like anyone who has tools, who wants to like stay organized, anyone who's like trying to not scratch a surface or you know, anyone who's like doesn't like losing things. You know,
Yeah.
people that we're looking for. So
Were you in the military the whole time you were, I guess, prototyping this, putting all the plans together, building your company, or had you left to work on the idea at this point?
So at this point I was National Guard. So I was working like part-time. So I was either at the base, I was, you know, taking college classes, or, you know, I was working on Grypmat. So sometimes I would try to like make all three of them work together, of like I had a engineering safety course and I had to do a project of like why, you know, what would be a new safety product. So I like did it around Grypmat and like talked about how it'd be safety at the base and stuff. So yeah. So yeah, basically in college and in Air Force at the same time.
That's really impressive. That's a lot of stuff to juggle at once,
Thank you.
considering how successful you've made your brand. And I know, so you work with NASA, like you work with crazy big people to sell your product. So I guess like in a nutshell, 'cause I don't want to make you drag out like every detail, but how did you, how do you think you got yourself to that point to get people interested, you know, in this product? People like NASA, Time Magazine called you one of the best innovators of, I think it was 2018, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how did you do it, I guess?
Yeah. There's, I guess like persistence is like is a massive point. Like when people say persistence, it's, I feel like the average person's level of persistence, I like definitely go higher than that. You know, the concept of persistence is very key. And, you know, also there's a point of like, I feel like a lot of people fall into this like self-worth trap. So like, you know, a lot of these trade shows, like how we got NASA is that we went to a trade show and I just walked up to a lady who I was like, she was at this booth with a magazine and I was like, do you write articles? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, would you write an article about me?
I love that.
And
That's
she's like,
ballsy.
yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, I'm at a booth. So I was at NBAA, National Business Aviation Association, which is like, this is where I think like crazy amount of it's like 60% of all the money spent in the aviation industry happens at this show. So this is like a very big show. So I'm at the show and I've got a booth that doesn't have carpet because that cost $300. I was at a booth where like the display that I have of the Grypmat was made out of, like I made it myself out of the house I was living. I took a door off the wall and I cut it up to make a display. And then I just painted it black. And then I had this table from like the Airbnb that we were staying at. I brought the table there and I just like covered it with a black sheet. And then like I have this display. So like that's what my booth looks like next to someone like Boeing, someone who's like building an entire new aircraft. So, there's that, like, you can get intimidated really quick, where
Yeah.
it was me and three other guys. And like this guy that was working part-time, I remember he was like, he's a graphic designer. He walks onto the booth. He's like, this is it. This is the booth. And I was like, yeah. I was like, this is all I brought. Like, so it was what I just described. And then we had like one of those like pull up banners. And then we had like flyers. And I was like, yeah, so just like, show them this is the picture. Once they see the picture, they'll understand. Like here they can like touch it, and it's on the curve display. And I remember all three of the guys were like, so one guy was working part-time. One was a friend who just wanted to go to that, who was an aviation nerd. Another friend was, he was in between jobs. He's never been on a plane before. He liked doing sales. And I was like, round trip ticket to Orlando was like $90. I was like, hey, I'll pay for everything if you just come and help at the booth. So two of the guys were just like not really vested into it. The guy who's working part-time was like, dude, I gotta like, he's more vested into it. And so they're kind of like, well, okay, we'll give it a try. And I'm like, look, we're going to talk to every single person that walks by. We're going to talk to every single booth we possibly can. So the thing is, yeah, I walked up to her and I said, hey, can you write a news article, or could you write an article about me? But the thing is, before that, I probably talked just that day, probably to 150 people saying the same thing. Like, not, will you write an article about me? But I would say, hey, this is my first time at NBAA. I just here to network and meet other vendors. And, I just wanted to hear about what you got. And I wanted to, tell you a little bit about Grypmat. And then, I would do that with every single booth, every single day. And I'm either that or I'm at the booth, like talking to everyone that's walking by. So, yeah, she ended up writing an article, and then that article is what someone from NASA read, and then they ordered on our website, and they ended up like breaking the website because of their order. And then they called me and was like, she didn't say NASA, she said like National Aeronautical Space, whatever. And then I was like, I think that's NASA is what I was saying when she's talking. And then I was like, I remember I was thinking so hard, like, is this NASA right now? And then she was like, I go, actually, could you just like send me an email, and then I'll like make sure it gets squared away. And then she's like, yeah, I can do that. So then she sends me an email, and I got this like email attachment or email set up where like, if they like send me an email or they like open an email, it'll like, their name will pop up, and somehow like it like generates a picture to that person. So it had the picture of like the NASA, like they call it a meatball. It's like a blue circle thing. And when that popped up, I was like, oh my God, this is like NASA. This is the real NASA. Like this is this is really
this
NASA.
isn't a scam.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like I definitely thought it was a scam, or like,
that's crazy.
And then yeah, so I mean, the thing is, most people would have probably quit once they saw the booth the way it was looking, and most people probably wouldn't have talked to like 150 people, 150 booths every single day. They probably wouldn't have like kept pushing. And then also being at that show, Boeing owns this company called Aviall, which Aviall is like the Amazon of aviation. So the Aviall like bigwigs were leaving a meeting, and it was really busy at the show. And so instead of walking down the main drag, they all walked down this like side hall, where I was at. And that's when they saw the Grypmat, and they were just like, they're like, is this like, they're like, do we have this in our system? And the guys in my booth were like, no. They're like, why isn't this in our system? And they're like, it's our first time here. We've never met at the time we didn't even know what AVL was. And then, so it was just kind of like going for it really. So that persistence, and also like, I say persistence and not like really trying to perfect. I see a lot of people perfect right away, and it really slows them down. So, you know, it's just like, hey, go to a trade show and pitch a product with an imperfect booth. And like with something that's imperfect, you're like, oh no, I don't, why would I do that? It's just like, it's the only, or you got like 20 minutes to sign up for this trade show, and you got an hour to pack, you know, do the best you can in that 20 minutes. And, you know, so yeah, I think that's what's really propelled me forward.
I love that story, from a makeshift booth made out of a door and an Airbnb table to an email from NASA. That's really something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. And going back to that point, you were talking about persistence. It's really clear from listening to you just speaking there that you definitely do have a level higher than, I guess, the average person, of really believing in what you're doing and pushing for it until you make some progress. Do you think that having been through something as rigorous, I imagine, as basic training is, and that military lifestyle helped with that? Or do you think you've just always had that inclination?
I would say, you know, there is a sense of like, when you do get through basic training, you're like, you know, feel like you've been through the worst, or been through like some rough points. So things will get easier. I think like what I've been recently realizing is that one of the most beneficial things from the military that I've been seeing is getting feedback and like being told what to do and just doing it. Where, you know, you could be told, I've been told to do weird shit in the military. Like there was something wrong with my shirt. And I remember he was like, the instructor was like, stand in the corner and I want you to lift your shirt up over your head like this and stay there until I tell you you can leave. I was there for like over an hour.
Oh my
It was
God.
like, yeah, it was like, so there, it was actually to a point where other people that were going through basic training, they're like, where's Burden at? Like, where's he at? Like, I thought he was in the bathroom. He's not in the bathroom. Like, and then they're like, oh, he's still in the corner. And he was like, anyway, so the thing is, you just do it. You just don't have rebuttal. So right now, what I'm feeling is that there's a lot of, you know, now when it's like, hey, your booth looks like shit, you need to fix it. It's like, all right, yeah. How do we do that? Okay, cool. We know how to do it. Let's go fix it. It's not like, oh, you think my booth looks bad? Like, yeah, just that's feedback. Just take the feedback and just keep moving forward. So
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty helpful as an entrepreneur, because I'm sure you go through so many different, you know, problems or roadblocks or whatever, to just be able to separate that and not take it personally and just take action rather than think. I think everyone overthinks way too much. So that's really cool to hear that you're able to do that. And then you secured that deal with NASA, which must have been huge, not just in terms of your business, but such an accomplishment for yourself too.
Yeah.
And then what happened next, I guess, in terms of expansion or the next steps, or how do you top getting that email from NASA?
Yeah, it's funny because so I put on Facebook, it was like, got a call from NASA today. And people were just going nuts on Facebook. And like, I think in like 20 minutes, I had like 300 likes. So just people freaking out. And then, yeah, there was one point that we like sold to the FBI. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
That must have been so cool.
yeah. Or like, we sold some to like Disney to work on the new Star Wars set. So anyway, I put on there, got a call from the FBI today, or got a call from Disney today. So it's funny because like one of my friends put on his Facebook, he's like, got a call from Tom Burden today.
Made it.
Because there was one point where when it was time to go on Shark Tank, I got a call from Shark Tank today. And then it's because it was kind of like an ongoing joke. But yeah, I guess, so after we sell to NASA, that's the next step, was like, we were getting ready to go from one product to three products, three sizes, a small, medium, large. And then, then we did the Kickstarter. I did a Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter was a fist fight. That was like very tough. I did 113,000 on the Kickstarter, and then a total of like 160,000 in pre-orders. So the thing is, it's weird because before, if you were to ask me like, it's 160,000 a lot, you'd be like, dude, that'd be a dream. That'd be great if I get 160,000. But the thing is, after everything was said and done, I was in the hole like roughly $3,000. So they're just like, the tough part with Kickstarter is like, I mean, here in the United States, we got 2-day shipping with Amazon, sometimes 2-hour shipping. And so now what you're doing is with a Kickstarter, you're like, hey, might be like 6 months to a year shipping. Like, we don't really know when you'll get your product. So what's happening is you're spending more money to like acquire that customer. And then you're also like, they're wanting, typically because they're new, they want a discount, or they're early, they want like a discount. So you're spending more money to convert somebody, and you're like needing to give them like a cheaper price. So it's really, really tough, and like really thin margins with a Kickstarter. So a Kickstarter is like, it's possible, but that was definitely like a big stepping stone for Grypmat. But that's like, be prepared for a fist fight. It's not, you're not gonna like, I mean, I talked to a guy who he put on Kickstarter of like making, I think it was like egg salad or something, and raised like 60 grand. I think it was like $64,000.
Oh my
so
God.
Like, you know, it is possible, like throw something up there and like, it just, oh my God, I just woke up and there's 60 grand on there. But like, that is very, very, very minute. And I honestly think that those days are over, where like early days of Kickstarter, there was a lot of exposure to Kickstarter, and there was not a lot of high quality pages on Kickstarter. So now like you look at some of them, it looks like a professional like TV show. You know, you got like real top-notch videographers because people are recognizing the value. So the thing is, in the early days, when there's that imbalance of like, there's a lot of traffic and like not a lot of people posting on it, that's when you can do the egg salads type stuff. But like now it's like, you gotta like step your game up in a different way. Yeah, that was basically the next step. That was the Kickstarter.
Yeah, it sounds like it was an interesting time period in your company and for yourself as well. And obviously you did go on Shark Tank, which was huge.
Yeah.
I watched your segment. You're very impressive, very good speaker and pitcher. So I guess what I'm wondering is why you decided to do that in the first place, because, you know, it's evident you were doing so well. People loved your product. And whilst it is a business show and you know, you can get money out of it and publicity and things like that, I can imagine there must be some fear that maybe it won't go so well, and the producers might make you look bad or something like that, and you could potentially damage the work that you've done. So what spiked that decision, and did you have fears about it?
Yeah, I had a lot of fear about it. Honestly, like it might've been a few days before, when I was going into the hotel, I was like checking into the hotel, and I was about to have a meltdown. I remember like there was a line. So I just walked into the gym and like looked like I was acting like I was looking around, but I just like found a back room in the gym and I just started crying.
Oh.
Yeah, I was like about to break. And yeah, you do like a rehearsal with like all like the cast, like none of the sharks, you know, like the camera crew or the producers and director. I did a practice run of like your initial pitch, and I just like completely froze. Like I bombed it bad. And it was afterwards, my producer comes up to me and she's like, do you pray? Do you want to? She's like, I don't pray, but like I could pray if you want to like.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Way to make you feel confident.
Yeah, I'm not praying. Like, you know, stop. Yeah, she like didn't know what to say, and then yeah, I mean there was a lot of stress around it, but it was just kind of like it was kind of funny because there was a guy on our team who like we did this like SEMA launch pad. SEMA's like a really big automotive trade show, and there was like a practice pitch with that, and I bombed it, and the guy that was on the Grypmat team, he goes, yeah, that means you're going to do good. He's like, you usually bomb it before you knock it out of the park. And I was just like, yeah, it's kind of true. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not like planning on bombing things and like, oh, I showed up really crappy, so that means we're going to do great. It just kind of like, there's almost like this course correction of like, I'm overly confident and then I bomb it. I'm like, okay, now we got to get our shit together and we got to like really practice really, really hard to make sure our pitch is right. So I think that's what's kind of happening with that. But yeah, it was kind of, I guess, had the mentality of like, you know, you're getting the opportunity to pitch in front of Richard Branson, and it's like what I say is like no effort will be lost to, or no opportunity will be lost due to my effort. So it's like, I'm going to swing as hard as I can. I'm going to swing for the fences. Like that was kind of how my mindset with it. So it turned out pretty well. And yeah, I mean, like people will say like, you're already getting sales. Why wouldn't you go on Shark Tank? There's a lot of like branding with it, you know, that people like branding and just like word of mouth, you know, people love the show. People love to talk about it. Like my hometown is like so crazy about, you know, the Shark Tank episode. And, you know, there's Shark Tank provides a lot of exposure. And the way that I felt is like, once I got 3 sharks, I'm like, now I got to hustle harder. I got 3 people like watching me, making sure like, you know, knocking it out of the park. So I feel like a lot of people don't look at it like that. People would see me working harder and then be like, well, isn't Mark Cuban helping you? Like, I don't just sleep till noon and expect Mark to answer the phone.
Yeah.
You know? It's like
that'd be a nice life.
Yeah, right. You think like that's like, you think Mark Cuban's like, yeah, actually I'll pay him money and then I'll do everything and then he can just like go on vacation. That's how it'll work. That's how people think for some reason.
And do the sharks actually make themselves available to you afterwards? Say Richard Branson, you know, if you do have a question or you want to ask him something, like, can you reach out, or is he kind of, no, that was the program and that's the end of the line?
The thing is, you typically like, I almost like don't want to ask them a question. Like if I got a question about Amazon, I don't want to ask Mark. I want to ask Mark's Amazon specialist. So it's just like, it's honestly like a waste of time to ask them certain questions. So it's just like, I mean, there's certain things with like QVC or like selling to like the female audience, like you got to like, I want like specifically Lori's opinion and like focus, you know, but there's sometimes where it's like, I mean, usually I'm asking questions of like, if you know what Klaviyo is, it's a email marketing system. And I'm like, Mark doesn't sit around all day looking at best ways of like doing Klaviyo, but he has someone on staff who does that. And that's who I want to talk to. So yeah, I mean, there's times like, I would say definitely Mark's made himself the most available. He like did a Shark Tank update with us. He like spoke at a Airforce event called Spark Tank, where it's like creating new ideas in the Air Force. You know, that gave a lot of like branding and attention within the Air Force of like me and Grypmat. So yeah, they do definitely, like, the sharks do make them more of it, like themselves available afterwards. But yeah, just I don't know. So some like it's not like a Saturday night and I just call up, you know, Richard Branson like, hey.
Leading on from that, what do you think the future holds for you and Grypmat as well? Do you have anything in the works for the coming years, or do you think you've done all you can do for that brand and you maybe have another idea in you, or what's next?
Yeah, so I always got new ideas, but I want to like grow Grypmat into like being more of like an online tool brand, but like more specifically, like creating an ecosystem of products that's going to, help our users be more efficient. What I really want to be is like the leading online tool brand.
It's very clear, I think, listening to you tell your story throughout the course of the conversation, that you have definitely experienced success in your life. So I would be curious to know what your personal definition of success is.
Ooh, that's a good one. I guess the way that I would like measure success, I measure this with myself and measure this like with other people, is I would say the rate of change between like your previous generation and you. So I met a guy who was he was a doctor and a dentist. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. But his dad, his grandpa, and his great grandpa all were doctors and dentists combined. And then I realized that's not impressive. You became a doctor and a dentist when your entire life you've been told that you can do this, and you've been told how to do it. The thing is, if you're a doctor and a dentist and like you came from a trailer park, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So that's like the rate of change from generation to generation. So I'm not really impressed by the guy who's a doctor and a dentist when he was raised by an entire family of doctors and dentists. If you're the first person to go to like NFL, like professional football, in your entire family, like, okay, that's impressive. So I guess that's how I measure success is like, how are you growing as an individual compared to like not putting down your parents or, the people who raised you, but I guess the way I look at it is like taking what they gave you and like, what can you create with that?
That's a really interesting take on it. I really like that. So different. And you've definitely set the bar very high for your kids. So it'll be interesting to see what the next generation of you does. And I just have one last question, and I'm going to let you get on with your morning because I know I've kept you for ages. If I put your 10-year-old self in front of you today, having been through everything you've been through in life, in your career, building your brand, what's the biggest piece of advice you'd give that 10-year-old self moving forward in life?
I think I would so I've thought about this. My uncle had asked me a similar question. If you were to, send yourself a 2-word note when you turn 13, what would it be? I would send a note that said military inventor. Now I don't know now if I would like keep the word military in there, but I would definitely like let my 10-year-old self know that to be an inventor. And I'd probably tell myself to, probably talk about like not fearing success and like it's okay to be wildly successful. It's okay to be, as successful as you want. And I guess I'd probably talk about like leadership is, I'd probably tell myself to seek out more leadership. Growing up, it was kind of like, don't be a leader unless if you're going to get paid more. Leaders put themselves through all this, like being a leader was like very negative because you're doing extra work. You're not getting, you're doing a lot more. Like the concept is like, oh, you're the manager, you do twice as much work and then you get like a 5% raise. So it wasn't like, really fitting, which being a leader, there's a lot of benefits to it. So yeah, I would say sharpen the leadership skills and like definitely focus on being an inventor.
I like that. That's really interesting. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you so much again. Your story is incredible. I've had so much fun talking to you and hearing all of your crazy adventures. So I know everyone will enjoy it too. So thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Awesome being on the show.
Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please rate, share, and leave a comment if you like what you hear. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Keep up to date with us by following @whatitslike_pod on Instagram and Facebook. To find out more about Grypmat and Tom's story, visit the links provided in the show notes. I'll be back next week with more inspiring stories, but for now, this has been What It's Like with Luce.